Hey everybody, this is Peter with BibleMoneyMatters.com. Today we're doing a quick one-on-one interview with David Carlson, a newly published author and author of Hustle Away Debt and Eliminate Your Debt by Making More Money. David just released the book, and I was at his book release party just last night, and I had a chance to get a couple of minutes with him to ask him about the book and why he wrote it. So take a look.
We're just doing a quick interview with celebrated and newly published author David Carlson. Thanks, David, for doing the video here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, just tell us kind of briefly what your book is all about, Hustle Away Debt.
Yeah, Hustle Away Debt, it's really focused on making extra money outside of your 9-to-5 income. And really, for me and my wife, we graduated with $100K of student loans, and just working our 9-to-5 wasn't really doing it as far as getting ahead. Still kind of felt like we were going paycheck to paycheck. So I think a lot of people who are in debt kind of feel constrained by their full-time income. So it just kind of gives another option of ways to increase your income and get in a better spot financially.
And can you tell us just kind of how the book came to be? How did you go about finding a publisher, and just why did you want to write a book in the first place?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing was I started the blog about 4 years ago, and I've written a lot about side hustles and how to make extra money. That's been a big focus of mine personally the past few years. And a publisher reached out to me and asked if I wanted to pitch an idea, and that's the first thing that came to mind was side hustles and increasing your income. So,
was there things in your personal experience maybe that kind of prompted, I think you talked in your book about how you graduated with a lot of student loan debt. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of relatable for a lot of people these days. Can you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so like I said, we graduated with $100K of student loans, and that equates to about $1,000 a month minimum payment. So that's just really tough coming out of college and being stuck with that kind of payment. And actually, I believe the 2015 grad who had student loans, the average is about $35K, and it keeps going up. So that's really influenced me personally, because I don't want to live paycheck to paycheck or kind of struggle to get ahead. And side hustles have really helped me kind of offset those student loans and save more money, invest some money, and just honestly have a better outlook on life.
So here's the book. I'll give that to you. And can you tell people where they can find the book?
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com.
And where else can they find you online?
YoungAdultMoney.com.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Let's talk money.
And welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Tonight, we have David Carlson of YoungAdultMoney.com, and he is going to help us discuss what it takes to start up a side hustle. We've probably talked about side hustles a number of different times. I'm not sure if we've really gone into what it takes to actually have a side hustle going and the sacrifices and what's needed there. So, welcome to our show, David.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. And the rest of the Money Mastermind Show is Kyle Prevost of YoungAndThrifty.ca, Miranda Marquette of Planting Money Seeds, Peter Anderson of Bible Money Matters, and Tom Drake of the Canadian Finance blog. Tom is not with us tonight. I'm Glenn Craig of Free From Broke, and I'll be moderating. So, side hustles. Maybe let's just start off and talk about what a side hustle is. The word hustle itself, I think, gets sort of negative connotation a lot of times, whereas, it's starting to change, and I think it needs to deserve a better connotation there. But what do we mean by a side hustle? You want to start us off there, David?
Sure. Yeah, a side hustle is basically any way you can make extra money on top of a regular 9-to-5 job. So it could be, running a blog like most of the other people on this show do, or it could be freelance writing, managing a Pinterest account for businesses, pretty much anything you can do that will increase your income above and beyond your 9-to-5 job.
So I think you kind of maybe sort of talked about why we would go into a side hustle. I mean, it sounds like these are all different ways to make some extra money. Are there any other reasons besides like maybe just a couple extra dollars in cash that somebody might want to go into a side hustle?
Well, I think people are a little more motivated if they're in debt, which is kind of where I'm coming from. My wife and I graduated with about $100K of student loan debt, and that's just such a drag on your finances, and it's tough to imagine, paying, I think our payment's $1,000 a month for 10 years, and it just really kind of sets you back in a way and kind of holds you back. So the reason I started side hustling was to offset that income. There is other reasons. Some people, I think, Peter, you probably can talk to this more than the others, but I think some people want to either stay at home and make money, or they want a spouse to stay at home, and their side hustle income can kind of replace their income.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. That's why one of the main reasons I started to do my side hustles, my blog, my graphic design on the side, was because I wanted my wife to be able to stay home with our son when he was born. So it was a way for us to kind of replace her income when she wasn't working anymore. Well, working in a different spot at home. Not that she isn't working.
Nice save. Nice save.
Yeah, sorry, I almost blew that there. But really, everybody's got a reason why they might want to be making extra money. You said you had almost $100K in student loan debt. That's a pretty common thing these days. Maybe not $100K, but isn't the average student loan debt these days somewhere around $35,000 or something like that?
Yeah, it's about $30,000. Yeah.
I mean, either way, that's a pretty big nut to have to pay off, be it 30 or 100.
Yeah, well, and some of us just consolidated our student loans and are fine paying them off forever. So.
Well, I think it depends on your situation, though.
It's true. That's true.
I think even if maybe at a even low interest rate, 100,000 is still a lot of money.
Yeah, I think it'd be a different story if I had 100,000. That's pretty steep.
Yeah.
But when you comes down to it, David, isn't that really part of when you're thinking about doing a side hustle? Isn't thinking about why you're doing a side hustle part of it? Just because not everybody's going to want to necessarily do one, but you need to have a why behind your hustle, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So I think debt's obviously a big driving force, especially student loans with how high they are now. Another reason, though, some people are a little more entrepreneurial, and side hustles can be a good way to kind of test out business ideas or give something a try or slowly ease into it and see if it's something that can replace your income or even create a new career for you. So there's a few different reasons why people do it. I think right now, debt, and especially student loan debt, is one of the bigger driving forces.
But I think that entrepreneurial side is huge, though. I mean, we're in an age now where I think online activity, computers and such, is a big factor. You can do things now on the side in small doses on a smaller scale and make it work, whereas maybe years ago you really had to jump in the whole way in order for something to happen. You had to buy a giant inventory, you had to have everything in place, and really took maybe like your whole work week to do things like that, whereas now you could do things like that with drop shipping and whatnot in a couple hours a week.
Yeah, and I think it's also easier to do work at any time. I think a lot of companies are contracting out work that can be done, in the middle of the night if that's when the contractor wants to do it, as long as it's done by a certain deadline. So I think that's definitely changing things.
And that's a great consideration too. I mean, if you get your 9-to-5 schedule mixed in with your side hustle schedule, that's a nice combination. So, I mean, if somebody wants to do a side hustle, it sounds great. I'm going to make some extra money on the side. I mean, it's not as magical as it sounds. I mean, I speak from my own experience here, but what does a person need to consider before they start pursuing a side hustle?
Well, I think you have to really think about how much time can you commit to it, and what are you willing to sacrifice when you pursue that side hustle? Because everyone's busy, everyone has a lot going on, but you really have to set aside that time and make it a priority in your life. And if you don't do that, you're probably going to burn out, or you're just going to quit one day. So I think really having a set calendar and knowing your capacity and what you can contribute towards the side hustle before you start will help you have a better shot of succeeding.
And that's not just a solo thing, though. I mean, a lot of people that have families and such, you have to get everybody on board when you're doing something like this, don't you?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have any kids. I have trouble imagining doing the amount of side hustles that I do with kids. So, yeah, people like Peter, I know you have a son. I don't know how you make it work, to be honest.
Talk to Glenn. He's got 4 kids, right, Glenn?
Yeah. When I figure it out, I'll let you guys know. But finding the time to do things, and then also having everybody on board with them allowing you to have the time to do these things, and understanding, because it sucks up a lot of your time for a lot of people. That post 9 to 5, that's valuable time. That's family time. That's husband-wife time. That's spouse time. You're choosing to use that time for something else. So you sort of have to make that agreement that, you know what, I'm going to be able to spend so much on this, and maybe this is why we're doing it, and maybe having those goals, sort of like those reasons for why you start a high side hustle, having that in place.
Yeah, and another thing, Tom's not here, but one of the things, Tom frequently talks about is that, there's that prime side hustle working time between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. And and I know because I've been on Skype, and Tom's, there interacting, ready to go. And I guess in Tom's case, the sacrifice he's decided to make is not necessarily family, but sleep. So.
Yep, we all know about that one. For people that don't have a lot of time, though, I was reading your book, David. Here, let's hold that up for people on video. Hustle Away Debt. And I like one of the things you talked about there was maximizing your current job before you even get into the side hustles, making sure that you maximize your 9 to 5 by maybe negotiating a raise or finding a promotion, maybe finding a new job. But isn't that something that really could be key for those people that don't have a ton of time?
Yeah, and I actually talked to a family friend a few weeks ago. They either read in the book or they read a post about it that I had published, where you can go on Glassdoor.com. I don't know if you guys have checked that out, but you can see kind of salary data that people have anonymously submitted based on companies, positions, geographic areas. And she used that to negotiate a raise. So she didn't even need to start a side hustle. She just used that, got a promotion. Well, maybe not a promotion, but a raise. So she's making more money. And sometimes that's a lot easier than starting a side hustle. I think everyone on this call knows side hustle money isn't really easy money. Again, because it has to be done on top of your 9 to 5. It's during family time, free time. And if you can increase your income at your 9 to 5, that's a really good starting point.
Yeah, I mean, a side hustle it's not Field of Dreams. It's not build it and they will come. And there'll be like a line of people just like willing to throw cash at you. It's, for a lot of people, especially if you're starting with a blog, it's maybe you're happy to get a few cents here and there. At least that's how it was for me. But
another thing, I mean, maximizing work is great, I think, and I think that's a really good point. But one thing that we kind of have not talked about is the elephant in the room, and that's television. According to the American Time Use Survey, the average person spends 2.8 hours a day watching television. And when you're sitting, yeah, I know, you'd think it'd be more.
That's the average.
That's the average.
I mean, there's a lot above it, a lot below it.
And when you think about it, stop and think about it. Like, seriously, track your time for a week and track everything you're doing for a week and see what you're spending your time on. And then when you say, oh, I don't have time for a side hustle, look at what you've been doing with that time. Since my divorce, I've noticed that there's a lot of time in the evening when I'm not watching TV anymore. I used to be watching TV with my ex, and now I'm not watching TV anymore, and getting a lot more done. So I think that's something to think about. TV really kind of sucks it out of you.
And actually, when I work on my side hustle or side hustles, typically I do have the TV on in the background. I know some people can't do that, but it's a way to kind of be productive with the show on.
So you're getting your
Depends on the
2.8
side
hours
hustle.
and
Some
a side
take more
hustle.
thought.
I used to try to do that, but then I realized like I really didn't get a whole lot done.
It takes me twice as long to get through my email if I'm watching a movie while I'm trying to answer email.
Yeah, but everybody's different. Was it Tim Ferriss talks about writing books where he's got like one movie just always on loop while he's writing. So it depends on what you can do and what you need to tune things out or what your attention span is. I'm like shiny object. Anything that could distract me, I'm out. So it was really tough when the Mets were in the World Series and trying to get anything else done and have it on the background at the same time. It was a whole lot of nothing going on. But you got to know your own abilities.
Yeah, another thing I found interesting in your book is when you're talking about all the different kinds of side hustles that you can get involved in, whether it's quick money side hustles, things that you can just do for quick cash, delivering pizzas or whatever. And then there's the long tail side hustles, the things that you may take a bit longer to develop and you have to build something first and watch it grow over time. I wonder if you maybe can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think some people find themselves in a position where they really are having trouble staying afloat and they need to make money ASAP. I think we've all maybe given advice to people like that or dealt with people in that situation. And again, I think sometimes it's important to think of the stuff to do before the side hustle. We already went over a few of them, but with student loans, you can get income-based repayment, just some of the different things you can do before you side hustle. But if you need money right away, you're probably not going to be doing the most glamorous side hustle. You're probably not going to be starting a blog because you're not going to make any money for 9 months or a year. So sometimes you have to do those things like deliver pizzas, maybe work a retail job, something where you can get in, start making cash right away. It's not glamorous, but it is a way to make money quick. And then some of those long tail side hustles are things that are usually a bit more fun to pursue because it has so much upside at the end. Maybe, starting a freelance business where you're maybe freelance writing or you're doing graphics for someone, and it's something that might take some time to build up clients, to get referrals, and you might not have a whole lot of clients right away, but long term you could end up doing it as a full-time job.
That's, I think, the great thing is that you could just sort of scale it up and you build up your expertise. And you hear these stories all the time where all of a sudden that becomes your new career. Now all of a sudden, for something that you've been doing a couple hours a week, now you're the expert at it and you have something else that fulfills you so much more than what you were doing prior. So I think that's a really great way to get your toes wet and just kind of feel maybe what your passions are.
Mm-hmm. I think we all know quite a few freelance writers who started out not doing any freelance writing, but over time they've added a few clients and some of them have made the switch to doing freelance writing full time, maybe do a few other things on the side. But it's an example where people were stuck in jobs that they might not have liked that much, and then now they're at home, they're controlling their schedule, and I think that happens a lot more often than we give credit to.
And I think it's also an important consideration, though, to say you're not going to just go out and be a writer. You're not just going to go out and be a social media manager or something along those lines. You really do have to kind of build up your base, build up your expertise, and get to the point where you're in demand because you have a talent that people actually want to have.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think with writers, I have a few different writers on my site, and I've had various other writers over the past couple years. And I think a lot of people don't want to get into freelance writing because I think anybody can write. I don't have any leverage. But like you said, it really is a skill and a talent. And when you get a good writer, you can tell that they stand out from everyone else. And I think it's similar in other spaces. I outsource the Pinterest management on my site, and the person who does it is basically an expert at Pinterest. She knows what she's doing, and she gets results. And I think a lot of people probably think that they can do Pinterest management, but they might not even have some of that skill and expertise built up yet.
And that's interesting too. Like, you don't have to be the top expert, right? You don't have to be necessarily the best writer, right? Because Hemingway's not coming back from the dead, but he's not writing for everybody's blog either, or magazine or whatever. But somebody who has better Pinterest management than you do, they've got a place for you, and they'll just get better and better at that. So sometimes it's not even confidence-wise. You don't necessarily have to be as big as the big media company. You just have to be better than what the average person can do to be able to find your niche, if that's what you're going to do. I mean, there's all sorts of other different types of side hustles that are out there.
I think that's part of what's great about being on the internet and being able to build a business online, is that you don't necessarily have to be the biggest expert in the world right from the start. You just have to know a little bit more than somebody else online. And there's millions of people out there online. You're bound to know more than quite a few people out there. When I first started blogging, I'd been doing it for a year or two, and I didn't feel like I was the biggest expert in the world, but I knew a lot more than other people, and I was able to turn that into an ebook and sell that ebook for $20 a pop online. And at this point, I've made thousands of dollars from that, just because I knew a little bit more than the rest of people online. So you don't have to be an expert in something to learn something and then become an expert.
Well, yeah, I can really speak to that. When I started writing about money 10 years ago, I didn't know anything about money. I was writing science things. I was writing for Discover magazine and at a physics website. I was a science writer. And just one day somebody's like, "Hey, can you write about retirement?" And I'm like, "Sure." And 10 years later, here I am. So I think that is something. But like David pointed out, I mean, you do kind of have to see that as a skill, and you do have to kind of have something to build on there. And as a writer, I take offense at the idea that anybody can just write. But
they didn't say like anybody can write.
I think
it's a very good point, though, that the thing I love about where we're at now is technology has made it so possible for so many people to do things. And heaven knows I'm not the best writer out there, but I make a living and it's great. And not a lot of people can say that. And there's a lot of other things that you can do online. There's web development. I have a friend who I went to school with, and he does web development from his home in Montana. And there's a lot of stuff that you can do online: graphic design, public relations, consulting. And the beauty of this is, we have video, we have Skype. I did my first ever financial, coaching session, whatever they call it these days, over Skype with a guy in Germany. And so you can even do consulting without having to fly halfway around the world. You can just do it by video. So technology has really, really helped us kind of make our own work lives.
We're talking. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yours was probably more on point than mine.
Well, I was going to say, we're talking a lot about online side hustles and stuff like that, but there are a lot of other types of side hustles you can engage in, right, David? I mean, there's engage in local business, build your own bricks and mortar store. I mean, can you talk to some of those types of things?
Well, I think one thing that I found really striking was just how many people walk dogs and run even like dog daycares out of their homes. My wife says that's her dream, but she's going for a master's in psychology, so I'm going to keep her on the counseling course for now. But I mean, if you worked from home, or if you had a more flexible schedule and you could, watch 8 dogs a day, you could make more than probably some people who commute to corporate office and, sit there for 10 hours a day and not necessarily enjoying their job. So I think there's a lot of opportunities with, stuff locally that you can do that doesn't necessarily involve the internet.
Yeah, I mean, you go into landscaping, go into, like you said, dog walking. If you're a physical athletic person, you could be a trainer of some sort, maybe. Or, I mean, it's really, the options are seemingly endless, it seems. It's just really finding what your own passions and expertise are. But what does a person really need to know before they get started on doing something, before they head down that road, whatever it is? What kind of ducks do they have to have in a row?
Well, I think to what you mentioned earlier, you need to get your family on board. If you don't have the support of your significant other and you haven't figured out how you're going to balance the whole family life, it probably isn't going to end very well, because in the best scenario, your side hustle is going to go really well and you're going to have a ton of demand for whatever you're doing. And then you're going to be stuck not knowing whether you should pursue more or whether to cut back, and even maybe a minimal side hustle that takes, 3 to 5 hours a week, that still might impact your family quite a bit. So I think getting them on board, and there's a lot of people who don't have the personality to keep a calendar, but I keep going to the point of plan your day, plan your schedule, and find exactly when you plan on doing those side hustle activities, because you have to make it fit into your calendar. And if you can't even do it sitting down looking at a calendar, how are you going to do it on the fly? So
that's a really good point. I mean, especially for those of us with the online businesses of sorts, it's really easy to go down rabbit holes and kind of forget what you're doing, and all of a sudden you think you're doing research, but really, you're not. You're looking up 20 other different things, and you realize that you haven't gotten anything done.
That is the story of my life.
So, I mean, having set times and exact schedules, that's a great piece of advice, I think, for a lot of people. What else do you think you need to know? I mean, like, what are the dark realities of actually having a side hustle? What are the negatives that people need to know about?
Well, actually, kind of a funny story. So at work today, somebody found out about my blog, and they told a few other people, and we were all kind of talking about the book and the blog, and people just don't understand how I found time for it. And then one of the ladies that I work with, she's like, well, do you even have time for friends? How do you even have friends? So, I mean, she was joking, but to her point, your social life is going to suffer if you side hustle, because you're not going to be able to hang out every single night with friends. You're not going to be able to have this full social calendar. And then I think the other thing is money expectations. I think blogging is probably the worst one, because a lot of people suggest that people start blogs, but you might not be making a dime for 9 months, a year and a half. And you're actually probably more likely to quit than ever make money doing it. So it's something to consider before starting.
And you bring an interesting point in with people at work. I mean, like, what happens when people find out at work that you do this? Depends on what you're doing, but I can imagine there's probably some cases where it might not be the best that maybe your boss finds out that you're doing something on the side, or that you have other people that are doing it. Depending on what you're doing, maybe you're doing something that could be competing or related, or maybe your boss is saying, hey, you know what? I want you access, via email at 10 o'clock at night. Why are you off doing this when you should be, working on the primary thing? Like, how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what other people have done, but I tend to keep pretty low profile. That's why until today, literally only probably 4 people I work with knew that I even had the site or the book or anything. Yeah, I think it really depends on your situation. Obviously, avoid doing anything that looks like it might be competing with your day job. Make sure it's clear that you're doing it outside of your 9-to-5 job and not during it. And again, it really depends on who you work for and what their thoughts are.
Yeah, you don't want to sacrifice your real bread and butter. I mean, that's the whole point of it being a side hustle and not jumping in feet first, because you still need to have that steady job for all sorts of different reasons. What about, like, how do you know when it starts to really take off? Like, how do you know when to start really putting more time into it?
I think it depends on the side hustle. I think, again, with some of the freelance writing, some people I know who now do that full time, they knew they want to do it full time, so I think they really kind of put their foot to the pedal and they took on as many clients as they could. And I'm sure for about 6 months a year it was a pretty difficult time in their life because you're literally almost working 2 jobs. Yeah, I think it just depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to create a new career or to build a business, you might have to put a little more time into it. I think with some of the long tail side hustles, as I call them, there's a little more opportunity to outsource. Like I said, I have a few writers on my site, which was a huge help when I wrote this book, because I don't know if I would have had the time to put the book together and put the time into that if I didn't have them around to kind of pick up the slack. Because I avoided writing a blog post for about 2 to 3 months while I was doing the book, and it worked out really well. But with some side hustles, like if it's a consulting or totally just trading your time for money, you have to both protect your time but also kind of embrace your side hustle when it's doing well. And if you can increase your price and your rate, that obviously is one way to lower the number of hours you commit to it. But I think it really depends on your goals. Some people want to be working 40 hours on a side hustle. Others don't want to work more than 10. So depends on your situation.
Yeah, I guess if you're really enthusiastic about it, it's easier to put more time into it and not feel the burn, right? Because you're loving it. Last big question here: like, how does you have a side hustle going? How do you deal with things like taxes?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the first year I had to pay in quite a bit. The second year, I got a lot back. Like when I do taxes, it always swings different directions. So I don't even know if I'm the right person to talk to about this, but if you look into quarterly taxes, at least in the United States, you pay in your estimated tax burden from each quarterly income. So you kind of have to estimate how much you're going to owe, but honestly, it's really tough to get that right on the mark.
I think you're allowed within a certain percentage based on what you've done in the past year.
So the nice thing about this is,
and I'm no tax expert.
you need to have paid 90% of what you should owe. But if you pay 100% of what you owed the previous year, then you're off the hook for any penalties that come if you're off by a large margin. So if you're off by a large margin, then you do end up having to pay a penalty unless you've paid 100% of your tax liability. So a couple years ago, my tax liability was like $8,000. And so as long as I paid $2,000 each quarter and made that $8,000, even though the fact that the next year was my tax liability was much higher, I wasn't penalized for that because I paid 100% of what my previous year's tax burden was. That's just the easiest way to do it, is to just look at your previous year and just say, okay, as long as I've paid 100% of what I owed, then I don't have to worry about that penalty. I do have to make sure that I have money in the bank to make up for the fact that, and that's the nice thing about the side hustle, right? You expect to keep owing money, right? Because that means you're making more. And that's how I look at it anyway.
It's a good problem when you owe a little bit more. Assuming everything else is stayed the same.
I always owe more money. Every year I always owe more money.
One strategy you can do, you can increase how much you're having taken out of your 401k at work. That's something that both my wife and I did after the year where there were tears at tax time. So we increased how much is getting taken out, and then also continue to make those quarterly payments. But I think it's really tough the first or second year that you make that side income, because you don't even know what a quarterly tax is typically. So Google quarterly tax, ask somebody who,
Come to
who finances their side hustles.
plantingmoneyseeds.com. I talk about taxes all the time.
Refer them to Miranda.
Yeah, well, another thing that a lot of people overlook and that I overlooked when I first started was state taxes. If you have a state where you owe income tax, a lot of people are like, okay, I've got my federal tax. I've saved some money aside for that. I'm ready to pay my federal taxes. And then tax time comes and they owe state taxes. And they're like, well, what just happened here? So if you live in a state where you have to pay income tax, don't forget about that. And that's because that can be an Achilles heel for a lot of people.
So it's worth doing a little bit of a research there on what you're going to need to do for taxes. If you have somebody.
I think it's important.
Go ahead, Peter.
I think it's important for people to remember that they are going to owe taxes on that side hustle money. A lot of people kind of don't even think about it, and they just think, oh, this is just extra money that I'm not going to need to pay taxes. No, you need to pay taxes on your side hustle money because that is income, and if you don't, you're going to be in trouble. Don't mess with the IRS.
It's not free money. On the other hand, if you have a legitimate business and you're legitimately making money, you're going to have expenses as well. So make sure you keep track of that as well to offset your income. So
yeah, I actually have a spreadsheet where I keep track of various expenses. I think it's super easy, especially, again, people who are trying to side hustle their first or second year. It's really easy to just kind of put that at the bottom of the priority list, and then you get to tax time and you have no idea how much you spent on expenses. They're on different credit cards or on different statements. So you really need to keep track throughout
April
the
14,
year.
you're looking for receipts and hoping for the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I love to do is, and it's really important, even if you're not getting an EIN, but if you just set up a separate account and say, this is my business stuff. Say, here's my business account, here's my credit card I'm using for business. That makes it a little bit easier to keep track as well. And then, I've got to the point where I just keep everything in my email now. I've got it set up so that I can get emailed receipts for things that I spend, and I just keep it in my business thing, and it's really easy. But it makes it easier if you organize throughout the year.
And I would just throw in the caveat, though, is if you're just starting out, don't think that you have to go out and get a whole new bank account. Don't go out and get a brand new credit card and everything else. Build up to that.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm
track
just saying,
everything, but build up to it.
I'm just saying, pick something. Like you don't have to get a new credit card, but just pick one of your credit cards and say, this is my business. This is the one I'm using for business expenses.
Mm-hmm.
So this has been a great discussion, and hopefully we've added a lot to people's knowledge out there. What we like to do here is we're going to like to have a final word where we go around. And Peter, if you'll give us your final word on side hustles, please.
Sure. Well, my final word is just that if you're thinking about making some money on the side, just get started. Get a few pans in the fire. Find something that you enjoy doing, whether it's maybe something you learned through your day job that you can take that knowledge and leverage it to make money on the side, or if it's a quick money side hustle, like David has talked about, delivering pizzas or a seasonal holiday job or something like that, or if it's a long tail side hustle with a blog or starting a business that may take a little time to build up first. But get started today, and you'll be glad you did down the road.
And Miranda, what's your final word?
Just make sure you kind of go into it realistically. A lot of people that I see are like, oh, I want to be able to quit my day job in 3 months. I want to be able to do all this stuff. I want to, magically charge people $500 an article when I'm a freelance writer. And there's just I hear that a lot, and I'm just like, oh yeah, because I just magically started making that money. I was making 6 figures immediately, but to be realistic and approach it realistically and take a step back and realize, maybe your side hustle only starts out with making $200 or $300 a month, and then you can build on it from there. But I know I'm such a Debbie Downer, but yeah, try and be realistic.
Yeah, it's not a downer at all. I mean, I think that's important for people to realize. Kyle, what's your final word?
I just think that it's a side hustle is a great idea, just from especially coming from a bit of a millennial perspective, and the gig economy being such a big part of our generation. It's great for income diversity. Everyone's job always seems secure until it's not, and perhaps a side hustle is one of those things where maybe you're sort of preparing the ground for jumping in with both feet, or it can get you in between jobs to the next job, your next day job. It certainly can help lessen that impact and give you a little more long-term security.
And David, if you'll close out our final word, please.
Sure, yeah. With side hustles, I have a passion of telling people about it who are in debt, as I mentioned earlier, and I think it can be such a lifeline to somebody who kind of feels either stuck at their work, they're working hard, but they can't increase their income there, and they're still having trouble making ends meet, or they're depressed about their student loans because, wow, how am I ever going to pay all this money back? I would just recommend that those people look into side hustles and see if there's something that's going to fit in your schedule and plan ahead, and like Peter said, just get started, and it can be a life changer.
David, thank you so much for coming and joining us tonight and talking about side hustles and sharing your expertise with everyone. For people out there that may not be familiar with you and your work, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work online and the projects that you have?
Sure. I started Peter's got the book held up. I started the personal finance blog Young Adult Money about 4 years ago, and my first book's coming out a week from tomorrow. It's called Hustle Away Debt, and it's about side hustles, how to pick a side hustle, pick the best side hustle, make it work in your life, and really succeed in increasing your income.
Thanks again, David, for joining us, and everybody else out there, thank you for listening and watching, and until next week, be good with your money.
Thanks for joining us on the Money Mastermind Show. Get more information at moneymastermindshow.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Google+.